Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the J Free 906 podcast. Shannon and Mike again here with you, and we have a special guest. We'll bring him on here in just a minute. How you guys doing this week?
Doing well.
Doing well.
I tell you, we have
How you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing fantastic.
Oh, my ever-changing background.
Your set changed again. What's up?
It has.
Yeah. She's working on
I'm
a new
in the
studio.
process of moving, so it's just.
Where's our mascot? I don't see her.
She's in the other room. I know. I keep trying to make it work, but there was no space for her.
Oh no!
Tonight.
Oh. You're gonna get emails. You're gonna get emails now because of that.
Tune in next time to see if the cat comes back.
All right. Sounds good. Hey, folks, thanks for being with us here tonight. And we really appreciate everyone that has shown up so far. And we are going to have a lot of fun talking about last night's episode of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, season 5, episode number 12, Drone-ageddon. And man, it was another one that had me on the edge of my seat for most of the episode, especially at the end. And we're going to get to that when we go through the analysis we're going to go through their analysis that they did in the command center. Did want to say real quick, if you have not already, please subscribe to the channel. And if you like the content of our show we have here for you tonight, please give us a thumbs up. It helps a lot with everything going on in the YouTube world. And I wanted to also mention that here over the last several episodes, we have been so very fortunate. I am honored in ways I can't even imagine to have had so many wonderful people join us on the show. We've had our guest that's here tonight. ERIK BARD has been on before, Thomas Winterton, Caleb Bench. We had Ryan Graves, who was the F-18 pilot that was testified before Congress. He was on with us. Check those out. We got those all.
Pete Kelsey, too.
Pete Kelsey.
Pete on.
Yeah, we had Pete and ERIK on together, which was another awesome show. They're all on the YouTube channel. Check them out, share them with your friends, and give them a look, because I think you'll be very, very impressed with not only what they had to say, but also some of the things that they told us that did not make it on TV, which is, I think, it's nice to get them here so they can explain the story, because so much of the show ends up on the cutting room floor, as we all know. But also that they can really explain some of those things and tell us other things that didn't make the show at all. But I also wanted to mention one more thing before we bring them on here, was something that Michelle had just said. And I'm going to bring this up here. It says, starting July 30th, Unbelievable with Dan Aykroyd will be on Tuesday nights in Skinwalker Ranch's place, Secret of Skinwalker Ranch's place. It looks like with 2 episodes remaining, they're both going to be next week.
That's what it said on the
a dual thing. So interesting for sure. But they did that. And then last night there was also a Behind the Gates show that we're going to talk a little bit about here tonight. So without further ado, let's bring on our very special guest. And again, thank you so much, Mr. ERIK BARD. How you doing?
I'm great. You've got me excited about the discussion, listening to the intro. I'm going to have to ask you to walk me through what you saw.
Yeah, I know. For someone who doesn't watch the show.
It was the best episode, I think, ever. To be honest.
It was good.
It was the most exciting.
I hope we get a chance to dive into why that's the case.
Yes, we will. Yes, we certainly will. But yeah, so it was a fantastic episode for sure. And I know you'll have some interesting things to tell us about it as we go along here. So let's get started. Let's jump right into it. So so The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, right off the bat, the guys from Mark Construction Drilling, they're out there, and all these troubles that we've had, and with the drill program, trying to get it up there, and it breaking off rods, and losing the signal, and can't push any harder to get through whatever the stuff is in the mesa there. And so they brought out the Binford 6000 beacon with the Binford. Yeah, I don't know what the manufacturer was on this thing, but they brought out the new machine on here, the new beacon and new receiver, and got this thing to work. And so there's a shot of them breaking it out right there. I didn't catch the name of it. I don't know. ERIK, were you familiar with this piece of equipment? Or
that was the first time I ever saw it. And what I can tell you, I was advised that by the time we were done going through these iterations of different pieces of equipment, beacon and receiver combos. This was the best money can buy. You know, we ended up putting, I want to say, 3 different systems into play, and if I'm not mistaken, that's the last one of them.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about, you know, a device whose purpose is, you know, you've got a beacon just behind the drill, the business end of the directional drill. It's sending a signal out that normally permeates the ground without any difficulty, and then you have this second instrument that sits up at ground level. It's being carried by one of the guys, and it provides, you know, all sorts of telemetry, like, you know, the temperature of the drilling head, the pitch angle. And also, you know, distance information out of that, distance below the beacon.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I like that it tells you what if it gets too hot too. Which you know, that's an interesting little point of information, because if you're up against something hard and you're pushing on it, and we came back with pulled back and then found that the drill tip or bit, whatever you call that, on the end was not damaged. It wasn't hot. It was like it was pushing against a frictionless surface.
Yeah. You know, the comparison has been made to, you know, pushing against some indelible surface. You know, like, you know, if you take a marble, that's what I think of. I think, you know, when you look at that the drill head itself, one of the drill types that we've had in play looked like, they call it a paddle, and it looks like it has a bunch of marbles attached to it. I want to say those are tungsten carbide.
Oh, wow.
I don't know why I was about to say silicon carbide. That wouldn't make sense. But in other words, very hard material attached to the end of that paddle, and they look like a series of, you know, like blueberries or marbles or whatever. And so when you think about the amount of surface area in contact, you know, it's actually quite small, right? You've got to think of a sphere, you know, touching a plane. So the pressures would be extremely high. You know, when you talk about so many pounds of force, you know, the pressure, of course, is a force divided by an area, you know, the surface, the contact area. So we're talking about crazy pressures that have been applied at times without any luck, without being able to push through. You know, clearly, and this is not my area of expertise, but, you know, listening to the guys who have been doing the work, very unusual circumstance. Difficult to get through, running into all the technical difficulties that you mentioned, including, yes, a broken, you know, the rod that actually goes up, it, you know, follows the drill head up into the mesa. It was just one problem after another.
Yeah,
and I can't believe those guys actually, and maybe they didn't, or maybe they did off camera, but I would have forgiven them if they'd started throwing things and breaking things, because
I didn't see
even I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Another broken rod or another dead signal. I can't imagine, especially when that's what they're really good at. And they're from Colorado. They go through much harder rock than should be there in Utah with no trouble. And yet they're plagued with one thing after another. It would have driven me crazy.
Yeah, this went on for weeks. I'm addressing the question that popped up.
Yeah, Rhonda put the question, how long were they actually there?
Yeah, well, so several weeks. It was a lot longer. It was a lot more investment of time. You know, I could tell this was pushing these guys. It became personal, I want to say. You know, I could tell that you know, at first it was you know, mild frustration, then it got to be a real head scratcher for them, and then finally, at the time, you know, you'll see the rest of what happens, but by the end of the season, you know, these guys, it had become personal, I want to say. We're pushing through this mesa, dang it.
Yeah. Well, where have we heard that before? That somebody has somebody that talks about the white whale. You know, it become very personal for Pete Kelsey as well.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of people, I would think, actually, because you know, once this place grabs a hold of you, you either run away screaming, or you have this part of you that says, "No, we're going to solve this, no matter what it does to me." So I don't know what area you want to fall into play on that, but I've never.
Eric, do you agree with that, or you want to?
Look where I am.
Yeah.
Look at where I am. I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, you think?
Yeah. Yep. And if anybody's going to get to the bottom of it, it's going to be all of you, your team that you have there. And you guys, like I've said, we've talked about this before, is that the team of people you have there, Brandon, I don't know if Brandon put all of you together, if that's how it all came about, but I mean, you have a wonderful team. And I tell you what, honestly, even after some of the things we've seen with the calf and the things that happened to that calf going in circles, and then as we're going to get to here, drones raining down from the sky. I mean, all these different things that have happened, and yet your team is all still there, and they're still going after it every year or every day, actually. For most of you are there all the time, whether the cameras are or not. But
well, Jeff, to your earlier point, how did we assemble the team? I think this bears a little bit of thought here. It is actually one of the upsides to working together with our documentary partners, Prometheus, that they're able to bring the people and resources together to make this happen, to bring all these SMEs or subject matter experts into the field. I'm not sure that if we weren't doing a documentary effort that we would have been able to bring so many people to the ranch, at least in such a short time. And so that is, I like to say that although what we're doing might technically not be considered, purely rigorous in every sense, like in the sense that we would like to be able to produce papers for peer reviewers, which is standard operating procedure in any scientific investigation. What we're doing is during the summertime is very synergistic with the rest of what we do the rest of the year. And I like to say we're casting a broad net. We've got a lot of people coming in from different disciplines, as you've seen, a lot of skill sets. And I got to say, I take a little pleasure in seeing folks cope with this problem set. We very often have people come in very experienced and sure of themselves and confident that they'll be able to do what it is that we've brought them in to do. And sometimes people go away scratching their heads.
Yeah. Good example is Jan.
Oh yeah. He's a great example. Yeah. He's a great, I think you could see a little bit of the smile in his eyes, as we were talking about the problem set, introducing him to the challenges that we had encountered up to the point, before we engaged with him. And his confidence is very well founded. I mean, this is a guy who's been all over the world and continues to do, he's very sought after, at the apex of his field in ground penetrating radar technology. I mean, he's designed it and he's created many of his own instruments.
Yep.
And so, of course, you bring an advanced degree wielding subject matter expert into the field and you tell them about the spooky things that happen in this otherwise unremarkable property. And yeah, you expect to see the smile. And Jan delivered, and then you saw the moment where he says, wait a minute, something's happening here. This is not supposed to happen. and I remember that in real time. And I remember thinking, okay, here we go.
Yeah, that was the unit that they were going to have flown by the drone.
Yeah.
By Kelsey's drone, and Pete said, nope, can't do it. And so then Thomas ended up, he was wearing it. You guys rigged up some sort of a harness for him to carry it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, when they first fired it up and he was looking at his, readings, the data he was getting, he's like,
yeah. It was nonsense, or not nonsense. It was very mangled data. And of course, Thomas is a lot like me in the sense that he's very goal oriented, and if he's going to go to all the trouble to do this survey, he wants to get good results just like I do. And I think he was not shocked, of course, because of all the experiences that we've already had up to that point in time, but a bit frustrated. You can imagine, you're baking yourself on those rocks.
Yeah.
The sun bearing down. I remember just crazy high temperatures, on the FLIR cameras coming off those rocks. So he carried the instrument, and the data that came back was mangled.
Yeah. How frustrating for him to have that happen after all that hard work. And like you just said, and he talked about that baking in the sun and everything else, and then come back and the data is pretty much useless. Just that's really frustrating.
This goes back to something that I probably said in season 1. Sometimes, most of the time, no data is data. Whatever it is that's interfering with our data collection process has spoken, and we've gotten the message. And that's another instance that it gives us pause to think about. Well, what in the heck are we actually engaging with here that would cause those readings to be so atypical?
I mean, that's what I would think, is that the more you don't get what you're looking for, you're actually getting information from that too. I suppose, especially since you don't exactly know what you're looking for. So data or lack of data is data.
Yeah. Yes, very much so. I mean, on the surface, I guess, pun intended, what you expect to see is a set of what we call returns. You're sending a signal down into the ground, and you're looking for what's coming back up. And after massaging that with the right math, you expect to have a kind of a picture of what is beneath the instrument during the survey. And it kind of reminds me of the experience that Jeremiah Pate had with Lunason. They took all the data on that balloon that went to 70,000 feet, and there were portions of that data that were just absolutely mangled. And it was a blue sky, calm weather day, and I remember it's still very fresh in my memory. Jeremiah made the comment that there was a certain altitude range. I want to say it was between 3,000 and 10,000 feet, where it was as if, in his words, he was flying through an electrical storm.
Oh, wow.
And this is a blue sky day. I mean, I couldn't have asked. I mean, I was actually able to follow. I had a sky-facing PTZ camera following that balloon all the way up to the point where they sever the connection and drop the payload down under parachute. Mm-hmm. Absolutely picture perfect ascent. And I was expecting some really good, coherent data. And Jeremiah and his team struggled with what they got. That comparison to ascending through a storm, that really stuck with me.
Because that's kind of what you guys have come to realize, that it is like a storm going on in many ways, with the corruption of data all over the place.
Yeah.
That's very interesting that he made that comment. That really rings out.
Yeah.
Man, I know. And then, we've talked about this many times about the GPS data, and the time differential, which is another thing Jeremy Pate brought up, that quarter of a second in delay, which is huge when you're looking at, things that work off that down to the nanosecond, that's huge. So yeah. I don't even know where to go with that, because it just screws up everything. It does. So many things so many pieces of technology that you guys utilize works off of time in some way or another. Yep. And if that's not correct, and we're going to get into some of that here in just a moment as we continue on, because last night, you had last week's show, the guys from Sky Elements were out, and they came out and they did a few experiments with you guys that did not go as planned at all. And then they were out again in last night's episode. And this time they brought the 1,000 units with them again, or 1,000 drones with them again. Mm-hmm. And I think that you were set up this time. And it was interesting because I remember Travis talking about how you were going to divide them up. Some over here in the triangle area and some in the east field, which I thought was fantastic, because at the end of the show, something that was said by you and Travis was how now your focus has got to be on those two places because of all the different experiments you've done so far this season are showing you that there is some kind of a weird connection between those two spots. And it played out.
It would be so gratifying to fully understand what that connection is. We're going out on that conceptual interface, that boundary between what we understand and frankly what we don't. And clearly we're speculating, but our speculation is grounded in our experience, i.e. the data. And just like you said, the results led us to comment, goodness, we really need to focus on these two locations. And, I really like the idea of following up with more tandem experiments. I refer to some of these things as experiments, and I think they're proper experiments. Sometimes it's more of what I would call an observational exercise. But wow, what happened with the drones? I'm sure we're going to dive into that some more here.
Oh yeah, for sure. Somebody's asking the question there, Scott, is about how long the visits were spaced apart in real time between when Sky Elements was there. They made it seem like it was a week, but it may have all been within the same time frame. I don't know. Do you remember what?
Oh goodness.
I know it was a year ago.
Yeah, I don't have a good. You want me to look up date stamps?
No.
I can do it.
No.
Yeah. Right. I could see why that question might be interesting to someone. I can't speak for the person who asked the question, but if I were asking that question, I would probably be thinking, okay, could something about like if these were like one after the other, could the initial experience, the initial activity have kind of prompted or brought on some of the effect in the second exercise? That's one interesting angle to think about that from. So I guess I'll go get the exact dates.
No.
Hey, Eric, Thomas brought this up, and they really kind of glossed over it in the show that because that drone company had been out there last year, that they did a tremendous amount of work to prepare for coming back.
Yes,
and upgrades and improvements. It was a very brief mention, I think, in this episode that, we did some upgrades and that was really about it. And he's like, they did so much work, and then to have all of it happen again, if not even worse.
So Mike, if you were Sky Elements, if you were part of that team and you had the experiences that you saw them, in a previous season have, what are some of the things that you might do to sort of mix it up and iterate the approach?
Yeah, I mean, we know that signals are a problem. The signal integrity, filtering, trying to, and I know that they have some local GPS that then they pipe that in. Redundancy. That's what I would try to push.
You mentioned the GPS. That was, in fact, one of the focus areas of their iteration of the design. Coming back and upgrading the platform. And my understanding, I mean, this is a considerable investment on their part. My understanding is that was 100% driven by their experience here at the ranch, and not the result of, say, trouble that they experienced in other locations. It wasn't something that they were coming up against. But they did, in fact, make a very substantial investment in upgrading that platform, including the GPS and the RF communications.
Yeah, that was my thinking too, was the communication, because we saw last week when they sent out the blink command, and that was all messed up. And
I loved it.
They were well, that was one of the questions that I wanted to mention too, real quick, about Insider program. I know we don't talk about it that much, or haven't talked about it that much this year, but the Insider program, Skinwalker Ranch Insiders, is a fantastic program, one of the best memberships I've ever been part of. And it does cost. It does have, I think it's like $10 a month or something like that, or you can pay by the year and you get a little cheaper, but it's fantastic. And in that, last Thursday night, you guys were doing a review of last week's show, and all of you guys were there and talking about it. And that was one of the questions that I wanted to ask then, and somebody else basically asked a pretty similar question to what I had. That blink command,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I was going to post a question about the, you know, we've talked about an intelligence on the ranch. And it seems as though in many exercises you've established just that it does seem like there's some sort of a intelligence at work here. And we don't have any idea what that is yet, but it does seem that way. And so I was wondering about communication, and I was wondering about a concerted effort to try to listen to see if they're trying to communicate with us. Someone is trying to communicate with us. And I thought about that blink command. If that was videoed and then could be looked at to see if there was some sort of a pattern in there that could be, I don't know. I mean, I knew I throw that out there and it may not make sense, but that's what
you're thinking about this exactly the way I do.
really.
Well, yeah. I mean, this goes right back to, you know, something we talked about. In fact, I think I showed it with, you know, the light garden concept of looking for spatially and temporally periodic, you know, coherent patterns of some kind. Something that would be the polo to our Marco, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I wish I did have a decent view of the drone swarm on the ground when the blink command was issued. You know, I could see from the Eagle's Nest cameras, which are located, you know, up on the mesa ridge line. That would be to the east, slightly to the north of the triangle, looking back into that area where they were staging to take off. And so I'm looking at it obliquely, but I can see that there's this twinkling going on the ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had the same question.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, oh gosh, I want to see this from straight above
overhead. Yeah.
I didn't have that perspective, but it did appear that there, you know, it looked like it gave the appearance of diagonal lines. When I was looking at it, I thought I caught a glimpse of some diagonal structure in the light pattern. Now, you know, the good news is if we do anything like that again, I'm better equipped. You know, we've added obviously some additional cameras to the ranch infrastructure, and so now I have. You better believe I've got cameras up on the mesa, right over the triangle, looking right down into that space.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
I have to wonder, when you're doing these, when you guys have a day planned of experiments, do you ever start your day going, I wonder what's going to mess up today? Or do you ever actually think that your experiments are going to go off exactly as you've got it planned?
Oh, wow. You know, it's like 51st experiments, right?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I guess I'm kind of exactly, you know, I guess I'm a bit hard-headed when it comes to these things. You know, I entertain two completely different sets of expectations. You know, usually I focus on the expectation that I'm going to get the stated deliverable. You know, it reminds me of the telescope experiment, any other experiment that you might remember, where I think strictly in terms of what I expect to see. And, you know, when I talk about putting out a clearly stated, testable, falsifiable hypothesis, and then very often I say, you know, a really good experimental plan that, you know, is one that says, okay, if I get result A, that leads me to this conclusion. If I get result B, this leads me to this conclusion. You know, I get anywhere from, you know, the falsification of the hypothesis, kind of on this continuum, you know, or you might get support for, but not necessarily proof. And then, you know, there are certain results that give us proof of a hypothesis. So I'm thinking in those terms. And then you get, well, what we've all seen, which is usually kind of perpendicular to the direction of my thoughts.
I just always find it funny that there's a lot of the comment of, I was not expecting to see this, which as a viewer, I would imagine that at some point you would think that you weren't expecting to see normal results, like ever. Like what your expectation would generally be.
Yeah.
You would not expect that at this point. I would be shocked. That would be a shocking day for me if I were you and things went off without a hitch. I'd be like, this is weird. I don't know if
but that's still data.
Yeah.
That's still data.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not content. I don't think any of us is content to simply marvel at how many different failure modes we can discover. Right? Something about that is less than satisfying.
Yeah.
But when I make a statement like I didn't expect to see this, this is only one half of my thought process speaking at that point in time. This is dolphin speak. You probably know that dolphins, half their brain is asleep while the others are, it's kind of like that, because there is a part of me that fully expects these catastrophic outcomes. And by the way, Jeff, this is a conversation you want to have with me and Thomas both in frame.
We'll have to do that.
Yes. When it comes to this Drone-mageddon result, I think this is probably a good conversation to have with both of us.
I mean, I think that's where I'm wondering if, when you think about like the observer effect, if you guys go into an experiment thinking that something may happen.
Well, by now, yes.
Right. Okay. That's sort of what I was getting at, is the expectation of it being unusual, having potentially an impact on it, your receivable or the deliverables being leaning towards what you kind of half expected, although probably didn't, as a scientist, should traditionally expect. So.
Well, I'll tease a little bit of what I was talking about earlier about the conversation with Thomas. I think you'll enjoy that if we're able to put us both in the same podcast. I will share this. Certainly less than 24 hours before the result that you saw. I want to say maybe 18 hours or so. Thomas and I had a conversation in the next room over here. We were standing in the main room, and we rehearsed to each other what we saw in our mind's eye, and we were talking about it raining drones and falling out of the sky, and we were laughing and talking about what we fully expected to see based on our experience to date. And I think Thomas even described them flaming and hitting the ground. And this is us just having a fun conversation, but seeing it in the mind's eye, in that time frame just before that happened. And like I say, that's a conversation you want to have with both of us.
Wow, we're going to have to do that.
Yeah, you got to do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I recommend it.
Thomas, get to the ranch now.
Oh, he's here.
Oh, is he? Well,
he's getting work done. He's.
Oh well, yeah. I imagine
he was so busy.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I spoke to him last week.
Somebody had asked the question, Ron did, and he was saying that the 2-cylinder spinning drone pattern, did this pattern chosen for a specific purpose? I know that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Well, it's always a compromise. If you ask me I can tell you what I wanted the exercise to be. Mm-hmm. I'm glad I didn't get my choice, but I think in terms of lines, grids, one thing I wanted to do is do a circulation where the drone swarm forms essentially like a perimeter, a rectangle. Think of a marquee, where let me do it like this, where they're doing this, right?
Oh, yeah.
That was actually my first choice. And the reason is, I want something that's easy to observe, easy to interpret, something where if there is a deviation, there's a spider coming down in front of me. Okay.
He wants on the show.
Yeah. I'm watching this spider come directly between me and the cat. I doubt you could see it, but okay. So I like these simple test patterns. If I were going to do a volumetric study, I'd go for a cube, right? I mean, it would be a regular spacing, and in that way, you can really easily detect deviations. Mm-hmm. Now, I said it's a compromise. Very often, as we sit around the table and we talk with, everyone in front of them as well as behind the cameras. We try to mix it up a bit, make it a little more visual. And if I think we can accomplish our science objectives with maybe a different pattern, maybe something a little more interesting to behold, then we go with that. And so I guess what I'm saying is the choice of the cylinder was weighing all of those things in the balance. The cylinder is still very simple. It's still fairly easy. It's easy to detect deviations. If something, if the radius, if you have a cylindrical formation and you've got a drone that's going outside or inside of that or above or below, it's pretty easy to interpret. And that's my criteria.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. And then, of course, when they were talking about the setup of the whole thing, and I'll bring some pictures up so I can get through a couple of them here. That was the team, Sky Elements, showing up on site, and then all of their equipment, the tons and tons of batteries and drones.
Yes.
And the guys, Tyler and Casey. But this here is setting up the two cylinders, and then having also, and then talking about the different types of equipment that was all going to be going on at the same time, or different experiments. So like you had the 600 in the triangle, 400 in the east field to do the cylinder shape. And then the rockets being shot up in the center of them was the thought to do. That's what you wanted to do, or what Travis wanted to do, was shoot a rocket up between, up in the middle of the cylinders. You also had the IR LiDAR drone between the cylinders going back and forth. Stationary stationary IR and thermal cameras, spectrum analyzers. You guys got the full gambit going during this particular experiment.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, look, they brought an army of they had a lot of hands on deck, Sky Elements.
Yeah.
No small investment in this experiment.
1,000 drones, 1,000 drones being brought out, and I thought to myself initially, I thought, oh my gosh, when they first mentioned that last week, talking about, how many they were bringing out for this. And then I thought, well, that's fantastic. And then I thought, well, geez, I don't know. Are they going to be able to get them all to work? Well, but the interesting information that we gathered from all of this was right at the beginning. And this thing's like happened last time, right before everything starts. A UAP is spotted. And then that's where things seem to kind of start going haywire. That's what happened last time. That's what happens frequently, is that a UAP is spotted, and then everything seems to be fine up to that point. The guys were talking from Sky Elements are talking about, yep, got connectivity with them all, with the new equipment and the upgrades that they had made. Got connectivity with them all. They're all getting the right commands. They've uploaded the pattern to them all, and everything that's got, great, good to go, until you get ready to start. And then, that's when everything seems to fall apart. But seeing these things all laid out on the ground, and we know that Thomas had talked about having to clear this area, cut the grass and all this stuff, to make sure that you had an area that was big enough to handle all these, which would be a task in itself. There's the east field, and then of course there's the FLIR going, showing that real quick. I grabbed this just simply because it's interesting to see the software that they're monitoring during this exercise, and we've seen the shows that these guys put on. I mean, I've watched a few of them, and they're fantastic,
it's spectacular.
I can't believe that this is something that's capable. Obviously, it is, because we see it in the sky. But I mean, this is fantastic what they do. And they talk about how they never have these issues.
Yes. And going back to the pattern, the test pattern thing, I have to think, we were talking about the smile, right? When we say, okay, here's the task, I'm sure that when I define, a grid, a cube, something very simple, like a line going, across the mesa, these guys are thinking, this is beneath us, right? No, I'm not saying they say that, but what I'm saying is, I wouldn't blame them for looking at these, what are essentially test patterns, as just very primitive, very simple, elementary, no problem, right? No problem.
Right, because they're used to doing these complex light
Yeah.
shows with drones, and they're like, "Oh, you just want to do like a square? That's fine. We've got that."
Right.
Yeah,
And I remember the first time we had a conversation, and I said, "Well, what I really want, guys, this is so cool. I want a line." And their eyes are glazing over, and they're like, "You really don't know what we do you?"
like they brought us out to the ranch to do a line.
I remember the very first exercise they did prior to what I would call the more rigorous, science formation. They did this really elaborate thing where they launched their drones. This is not this season, but a previous season. They launch the drones and they do all this. It looks like a big lollipop in the sky. It's doing all these shape changes and it's really dynamic. And I'm thinking, how am I going to interpret this?
Yeah.
I was getting nervous that maybe they had just rejected my proposal.
Yeah.
I was watching this. I was like, how am I even gonna tell if anything's going wrong with this complex pattern, over the train? Well, thankfully, of course, they did do the simpler patterns. And so this kind of reminds me, I'm sure that when I describe something like a line advancing towards the ridge line or a grid or a volumetric, a cube or something like that, this is child's play for these guys because they're capable of choreographing these remarkable displays. And I like that I was going to say, Jeff, I like that you put that shot in there because, my attention and your attention are probably drawn to a lot of the same things. I like to see the process. It's like it's got that sort of how it's made, how it's done appeal, right?
Yes.
And
exactly.
their software is pretty impressive. The only thing that I haven't gotten an affirmative answer on from these guys is, do you have reported GPS positions for each one of your drones throughout the entire exercise? That's the one thing I wish we had for all of them.
Yes.
Yeah. So what we're doing is, we're attaching my devices to select drones. Usually, like, if we're going to do, let's say, a grid pattern, it would be the corners, maybe one in the center, one on the corner. And so I've used devices like this one. Here's a little GPS tracker. This ceramic bit right here is the actual GPS receiver. And then this thing does internal data logging, right? So you would stick a micro SD card in there, and then it also has an antenna on it that allows it to broadcast.
Did you make that?
Well, yes and no. This is not my design.
Okay.
Let me see. What's the serial on this one? You notice I'm having to with each passing season, this is getting worse. I can't read it. Yeah. This is Unit 23. This is a good performer. This is one of my favorites. Unit 23. It's one of my favorites. What can I say? A lot of miles on this guy. So I built some of these to answer your question. I did hand built some of these. I'm not going to repeat. Bryant had a really funny comment in one of our previous Q&A sessions about pepper. Maybe you remember it. I don't know if you remember the comment. But I've said that, assembling these things is like trying to attach coarse ground pepper, to a printed circuit board. Take a look. You see all this. So this is one example of a tracker. Here's another one. It's a bit more sophisticated. It has more measurements taking place on this besides simply position. Here's yet another one. And the reason I'm holding these up, guys, is because I want to drive home that we have a plurality of GPS technologies. Everything from the straight up GPS only, as in only the American system, the L1 tech, as well as the systems that look at what we call GNSS, which takes in not just GPS, but GLONASS, Beidou, the others. And we're seeing these anomalies in the air as well as on the ground. And just that is such an interesting discussion, just talking about GPS, how it works, and what kinds of anomalies we've seen with what systems. There's a very lively discussion, online. People come in and they ask about this technology. That's why I want to take the chance to hold it up in front of the camera.
Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
I love props.
Yeah, Mike is the king of props, and I sit over here with nothing.
Love a
I'm
good
just like,
prop.
All right, Mike,
You have better
well,
props
you
than I
got-
do, though.
I've shown you mine. Now you're going to show.
I have a laser, and that's about it.
Oh,
I don't know
yeah.
that
Okay, I've got a few of those.
I wasn't prepared for a show.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
For the drones, were the specific colors, did you guys choose red because of the visuals for the show? Did you choose red because that for a particular reason? I mean, it seems to be thematic with the show that you guys have done red, but because of it,
That's a good
Section.
question. How do we converge on red?
It
I can
just
think
looked
I can kind of reverse engineer. I can go back and construct an argument in favor of red. There are certain colors that those drones are able to display.
Okay.
And here is a fully saturated red. One of the things we look for, there are several things in scope. Obviously, drones falling out of formation is one of the deliverables. Another interesting deliverable would be an apparent change in color. With all that we've speculated might be going on in the space over the triangle, as well as over what we call the East Canyon anomaly. There's the possibility, however remote, that we might see red become something other than red. It might shift somehow. And so, I like that choice of a color. Again, it's one of those more than one reason choices.
Okay.
This one, I wanted to bring up this question real quick too, and thank you, by the way, Stephen H. Thank you very much. Appreciate the donation. Lots of equipment at the Triangle. Can you talk a little bit about power, i.e., mains wiring, gas generators, solid state power banks, solar? Also, did the laser/drones folks bring their own power?
Oh, neat question. I like these kinds of questions. So we, when we're doing these exercises out in the field, we do have, we have several options. So it's almost like the right answer here is yes to all of the above. We do use local power banks, without getting into brand names, these, a box about this size with an inverter on it. It's a device that takes a DC battery voltage and turns it into what you get out of an outlet. So we do have that. And I'm guessing that the person asking this question will appreciate this part of the answer, which is that I insist that we use, to the extent possible, true sine, not these harsh on off, above and below zero circuits. We like to have sine or approximate sine to have good clean power to prevent ringing and all sorts of artifacts that sneak into your electronics if you're banging on them really hard with these square waves. Maybe that meant something to some of our audience.
Yep,
I just like to have a nice fixed frequency, well-behaved sine wave power supply if I can have that. We also have, in addition to those boxes, line power out at the Triangle. We added a power drop specifically to service the needs of our experiments in this location. So this is a brand new transformer that we have out there. We run the lines out, and we can provision things that way. We have also had very large trailer mounted generators. And I guess, we take those off at enough of a distance so that the noise doesn't pose a distraction. The answer really is yes, all of the above.
All right. Here's another question from Craig. Any thought that you might have encountered a protector entity that is preventing the team from getting close to the something or getting close to something that is dangerous? Any thought to that? A protector entity?
I'm really interested. This is where I go into a different lane. And Shannon and I have had some really good conversations about this aspect. And that is the psychology of our own engagement. This gives us a chance to study not just what we think is going on. There's the phenomenon out there, and then there's the phenomenon in here, right? What's going on in our thinking? When we think about, we're constructing a narrative. And this is not a criticism. This is really, I'm fascinated by this. we're constructing a narrative that says that there is what has been referred to as a trickster, or there is an intelligent other to which we ascribe an agenda to frustrate our efforts because things aren't going the way we might want them to go. I'd like to suggest something, and maybe I've said this before, and if I have, I don't apologize, because I think it bears repeating. And that is that, if we talk about communication, and let's suppose my attention is focused, my experiment is focused on this device, and I want this device to measure something and bear witness to something happening in this space. Well, if I wanted to get your attention, I would probably manipulate the thing you're focusing on. It's very efficient to try to get a message through to you, at least something very Boolean, yes or no, you're dealing with a someone or not. And so if let's suppose there's an energetic budget associated with being able to get my message across, I can only do so much. I'm probably, if I'm the other that we imagine out there, I'm probably going to do something that is for sure unambiguously going to get your attention where it's focused. And so I don't necessarily ascribe, this kind of capricious trickster nature to the phenomenon at this point. I see it as very efficient, because look, although yes, it's true that things don't go the way we plan for them to go, we are getting what could be an even more important piece of data. As we back away from this and let the data self-assemble, and in the aggregate, there is this, I'm starting to sympathize with the view that it's more than just coincidence that things are going wrong the way they're going wrong.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of viewers that have that same idea as well, because, with the number of failures that seem to happen, and I'm going to say failures, even though they may not be a failure, they may be a manipulation of the equipment, as you just stated. So, but with the number of those happening.
Yeah. I know. Look, if you'd asked me back in 2016 whether I thought I'd ever even entertain these ideas, I would have said no. Maybe I'm revealing my incoming bias on this. I've had to audit myself, both in the sense of belief systems and disbelief systems. And I've had to remind myself and then others that science is not a disbelief system, although a lot of people see it as such. Right. It's not a tool set for debunking things. It's a tool set for exploring, ideally, on that boundary between what we know and what we don't know, and where we are most vulnerable, but also where the payoffs are the greatest. And so, I get excited, of course, when we see this very suggestive kind of apparent manipulation of our technology. But I'm not bothered by it. I still don't see it as antagonistic. I see it as a very efficient way of delivering a message, if in fact there is a message to be delivered.
Right. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad, because that's kind of the way I want to believe about it. And that's why I keep talking about the communication thing.
Yeah.
But you're right. If you're focusing on something, then mess with what you're focusing on, or try to manipulate it in some way.
So I'd like to ask you guys, as well as those who are submitting the question or have submitted the questions, does my answer make sense?
I think so.
I sometimes wonder whether my thought process is intact.
No, it definitely does make sense. And I also think when the question comes up about entities of a protective nature or a not protective nature, like a trickster that you're referring to, it's also, I think, important to exercise ideas that exist outside of there even being an entity, because I go back to thinking about the fact that, like, currently we're trying to design architecture to warn future humans of buried radiation, like waste, right? Nuclear waste. Like, how do we construct something that will outlive language, that will be a marker to future humans that the area is dangerous, something to that effect.
I love what you said. I love that.
I think it's really interesting to just think about that too. Like, it could be there could be something there that's causing this stuff.
Okay.
That maybe is, you know what I'm saying? there could be other explanations besides a good or bad entity. Like
Uh-huh.
there's an exercise, I think, and a deeper thought process that can go further than it just being, maybe it is a protective, but it's not in the way that people would necessarily think about it being protective, if that makes sense.
So intellectually, I mean, it's very challenging, I think, for all of us. How do we dance this dance? How do we avoid undue anthropomorphism, which is, I mean, we tend to do this, right? We see something happen, whether it's the thunder or the volcano or, whatever the condition is, we tend to ascribe intentionality to things. And sometimes, yes, it can be unwarranted, even silly. And yet we don't want to take that off the table. We can't. I'm at this point, I'm thanking my lucky stars that at least I didn't introduce this into the narrative at all. This is part of what we inherited. And so we are, hopefully, without being dogmatic one way or the other, we're allowing, like I like to say, allowing the data to self-assemble. And if in fact in the aggregate, the data support the idea that there might be intelligence and intentionality behind what's happening, and what I have argued is a very efficient use of our technology to get a message across, then it'll sort itself out. We'll get there
eventually.
Yeah.
I think
one way or the other.
That trying to keep a objective scientific viewpoint on what all is happening and your intentions for how the experiment is supposed to go, and then the fail modes that happen. Caleb said something when he was on about in law enforcement, they talk about the totality of circumstances. And cool. I can very easily, on any one of these fail modes, come up with a reasonable explanation that has maybe a 2% chance of actually happening, that it could actually be caused by something explainable or natural or expected. But you can only do that one at a time. And once you back up and take a look at all of them, all happening in rapid succession, the totality of circumstances, you accumulate all of those statistical probabilities, and it becomes almost impossible for all of that to have happened almost the same time, the same evening, or the same attempted experiments, and it's difficult not to slip into. It's almost like there's an intent behind what's being done to these experiments. These fail modes almost seem like deliberately preventing the rockets don't fire. The drones start raining down. The drones don't connect. I mean, it's at every step, there's something that is disruptive to what you guys are trying to do and accomplish. It just, like I said, it even for me, it gets difficult at times to keep in mind it's just data. But the totality of circumstances sometimes does look like there's intent behind what's happening. Not unlike the other night that comes to mind is the night of the telescopes.
Yes.
So many things happen so fast that were all clearly directed at preventing you from doing what you wanted to do. How do you not recognize there has to be some level of consistency there? And that leads you towards an intent of some kind.
I think, first of all, Mike, I really enjoyed listening to how you framed all of that. You have such a reasonable way of stating it. And I find myself, my thoughts have been reconditioned, I think, somewhat through exposure to all of this, as we like to say, in the totality. And obviously, I've spent an awful lot of time just being here, just being an observer of, living everyday life, just doing what are probably some pretty mundane things. And having had all the time that I've had to think about this, I have revisited this idea of something acting in a capricious manner or a manner whose only purpose is to frustrate my efforts. I understand going to, railing to that interpretation of the outcomes, but I keep coming back to, if I wanted to get your attention, if I wanted to signal my desire, my willingness and hope of being able to get through to you, I'd weigh out the pros and cons of, perhaps even destroying your equipment to deliver my message if I thought that would efficiently get the idea across. And so that's kind of where I am today in my thinking. Who knows, maybe that will change. Look, Travis and I would tell you, when we did the telescope experiment, the intent was to follow through with a very reasonable line of thinking for any paraphysicist. What's going to happen to the light? We're going to see defocusing. Is it going to be, are we going to see shadowing? Is something going to block the light? Is the color content or the spectral content of the light going to change? And we had sound reasons for setting up the experiment the way we did. And what did we get? We got a completely different message. It wasn't just physics.
Right.
Yeah. And so it was, so it clearly was with the drones. Here I'm going on about my test patterns, my desire for a simple geometry and looking for deviations. And what we got was no simple deviation.
Yeah. Speaking of which, let's take a look at that real quick. I've got a little bit of a video that I borrowed from the show, and of course, this is on the History Channel. But let's bring that up real quick because I want to show, what happened. Now, it looked like these all started to get to about 30 feet off the ground. You had one set go up, and then the second set comes up to meet them. And so let's play this real quick and have a look, and then I'll pause it here because there's more on this particular video, but there's no sound with this. There you are with them about 30 feet. He's telling everybody to get back, and here they come. They just come down. Everybody's running.
And you were just watching this from the command center? Yep, there you are.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
These things are cartwheeling out of the sky.
And then there's that one. He's like, "Where is that one going?"
Uh-huh.
And so, and so, it's interesting the height that they reached, and we'll get into that a little bit more as we go along here. But they were just coming down, just falling, and then some of them. There was one that we talked to Thomas, and he said it came right in the tent. Like it was after them, like it came right in and was flying. He took his coat off and he was going to swat it with the coat. I think he actually did at one point.
He did.
Knocked it down with the coat. And then he said, that's the one that had your GPS on it, or one of the ones that had your GPS on it. Do you recall that as being the case? It was one of the ones that your own GPS was on it?
Yes. Yes. Oh yeah.
So what's the significance? Here you got 600 drones going up in the air, and the one that comes down into the tent, while many were coming down, was the one that had your GPS on it.
So that wasn't wasted on you, I can tell, and it sure wasn't wasted on me. So all of this is happening, in one thing after another. It's not clear to me in the moment until I go out there and I'm briefed on the experience from the boots out there on the ground perspective. That's when I learned that of all the drones, the one that had one of these little guys strapped to it. And by the way, I did not select the drone or its number. I was advised by the Sky Elements guys, which ones would be on the corners or which ones would be on the, in certain positions at various points in the flight. And so we chose, they said, put it on this one. I said, great. They walked me out there. I strapped the sensor on. And I find out that indeed one of the drones didn't fall out of the sky onto the ground. It came down, flew under the canopy, and was continuing to fly around as if it was. Thomas could describe it. He was the one that was there. But it was. The word attack comes to mind. Well, you got these spinning sharp blades, and
right? Exactly.
You don't want that thing raking against your face.
No.
And so, he took his coat and swatted it out of the air. And then I learned that, in fact, it's the one with my tracker on it, and it's drone number 108.
108. That is
I actually asked the Skyline guys, I said, would you give me that drone? Can I have it?
Did he give it to you?
I never got it.
Oh,
I feel like
108.
given you guys were discussing it the day prior that it was going to be raining drones, the drone went right for Thomas.
I thought I heard Thomas walking. I wish I could get him in here right now. I mean, you got to hear it from both of us.
If you want, go ahead, get him. I mean, that would be.
He might be.
If you want to step away for a second, go ahead.
I don't want to put him on the spot. He might be really busy.
He's always really busy.
Thomas, this is maybe not good form, but
no, it's fine.
I want to give him the option of stepping in to share this.
Yeah.
Okay, is this
fine?
Okay,
Go ahead and step away for a
Yeah.
second.
are you okay with that?
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
great.
you. Hey, Thomas.
Yeah, there's another question I'm going to bring up here too. This was from Michael Payton. Brought up a question up that I want to ask him about too, because I think they've kind of answered this one before, but we'll see. It has to do with the planning out and speaking aloud experiments.
Okay, I got lucky. Thomas has a minute.
Oh, good. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, Thomas, nice to see you again.
Yeah.
So just so you know, I've teased a little bit, and I actually said, "Gosh, you guys need to have this conversation with Thomas and me both in frame." And I mentioned that we had a conversation. It was kind of a fun conversation. We talked about what might happen.
Yeah.
With the, do you want to share your version of it?
Well, it's funny because I've been looking forward to this episode since it happened last year. And I mean, out of all the things that happened, it's just absolutely crazy. But time has a funny way of messing with our minds. And so watched the episode last night. It's the first time I've seen this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to think, because we had the drone guys come out twice.
Yeah.
And the first one, I mean, it was relatively calm other than we started having a lot of electromagnetic and, stuff. But I remember you and I were over there, and correct me, did this conversation take place on the first exercise, or did it take place as we were setting up the second exercise?
This was, as I recall, the evening before we did this.
Okay. That's what I was thinking, but I wasn't sure because I couldn't remember.
Yeah, so we were right over there. We were standing right in that room through that door, and I want to say joking, but that's not really the frame of mind.
Wait. Where did you think we had it?
Right over there.
I remember having it at the tent out at the Triangle.
Now that's crazy.
Because I remember having Preston close by.
Yes.
And Preston was like, "Don't talk like that."
Well, you may have repeated the conversation that we
maybe that's what it was. We had it here. We were telling you about. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I'm sorry. My memory on this stuff. It gets
this is why you need both of us. You need both of us.
I like running things by because sometimes like it gets off. But yeah. So basically, the premise was just that Eric and I were talking and kind of half just in jest and kind of joking around. Like, we're getting awfully tired of this same old electromagnetic interference. I mean, you've messed with the phones, you've messed with computers, you've wiped memory cards. Okay, you've made the drones disconnect. Like, yeah, we get it. You can interfere with equipment. Big deal. And we're sitting here having this conversation. We're like, I'm getting tired of this. If this is the best you can do, that doesn't really impress me anymore. Like, you're going to have to up the ante to keep my attention. And Eric and I are both sitting here, and we're playing off of each other. And we're both, I mean, listen, if that's as powerful as you are, Ranch. And so then we said, if you want to get my attention, I want to see all the drones fall out of the sky.
I remember the words were flaming, sparks and fire,
total devastation, chaos.
It was a kind of a Ghostbusters-esque, delivery, cats and dogs, that sort of thing.
And if I was to characterize that conversation, I mean, look, we're blowing off steam and whatnot, but I could see that if an observer was watching that, I'd be like, that's a pretty irreverent conversation. Like, and And then when we recounted it to Preston,
Mhm.
as you know, over there at the tent,
Yeah.
Preston looked at us. He's like, "Don't say that." He's all, "Do you know what those forms cost?" I think he said they're like $2,500.
That's not funny.
Yep. Yep.
And he's like, "Do you know how much money's sitting out in that field?" And I said, "Ah, don't worry about it. You know, that's what insurance is for." And he's like, "Yeah, we don't want to do that."
Yeah.
So
That's
that's how I remember.
That's their livelihood. So yeah. So I'm so glad you came in when you did. Because I was teasing these guys. I said, you need to get both of us in frame, and we need to have this conversation.
I would like to hear your version of it.
So you and I had the conversation standing in front of that black couch in that room, where we were very much like what you just described, talking about reflecting on what had happened with previous experiments, of course, the telescope night and some of the other stuff. And we were describing what we pictured in our minds as drones falling out of the sky and bursting into flames. You used the term bursting into flames. I remember that. Yeah. And so we had this picture of mayhem. We were constructing this story. Why would we do that? Why would we do that?
And we were framing it like, Ranch, if you want to get our attention, if you want to impress us, like this is what it would take.
Yeah.
And it came right for you, Thomas. Out of the two of you, you were the only one standing out there. And it came right
So
one came for you.
The drone with my tracker on it, and there weren't that many, flies under the tent, as I understand it. Now, I'd like to get your description of
Well, they start falling, right?
Uh-huh.
And the thing is that when they started falling, that formation had come to the south. So it's like over top of the tent.
Uh-huh.
And it shouldn't have done that.
Okay, so it's going the wrong way.
Right. So it comes south over the tent.
Mm-hmm.
And they start dropping. And so I dive, and I think you see it on the episode, like I dive under the tent, and Preston's sitting right there. Mm-hmm. And as I'm sitting there, I look up, and here's our camera guy, not even flinching. He's just got, he's got this big camera on his shoulder, and he's not missing a beat. And I see this drone start like coming down the same, and now it's the level under the tent, and it starts coming in the tent, and the camera guy's standing right there, and I realized, like, those blades are so sharp, if it hit his neck, it would just
cut you.
I mean, it would just cut his neck up, maybe even cut, some serious arteries there. And like, he says, "Hey, watch out!" And he's just so focused on what he's doing, he doesn't even look. And I realized at that moment, like, I needed to do something. That's when I jumped back up and I took my jacket off, and then I went up to get the drone, and it was still coming down inside the tent towards us. And Preston again, like, I'm talking about total professional. He's sitting at the table the entire time. He's trying to get the drones to abort and land, and they will not respond. So Preston's trying to land these drones. And he can't get them to respond to his commands, and he's not paying attention. I told him, I'm like, Preston, these are coming in, and he didn't even flinch. He was so focused on what he was doing, that I realized these guys are focused in on their task at hand. And so when that drone came in and started coming towards the camera guy and Preston, then I took my jacket off, and I swatted at it, and then put the terminate.
I told these guys I wanted that drone. I wanted drone 108 for.
I thought they said that they'd give it to
I
me.
know they did. Dang it. Now, do you think it's okay if we talk about what the dollar value in?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't want to say anything that I shouldn't, but
I don't know why that would be off limits.
Let's put it this way: in terms of drone hardware destroyed by this event, we're talking about approaching $500,000. I think it was $475,000.
$400-something thousand.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's not a stunt.
Wow.
Does insurance cover something like that for them?
We talked about that.
Their insurance, there is with Preston, those guys have insurance on their drones. The production obviously has insurance on everything that's going place. I don't know how they worked it out, but I do
just
know.
can't imagine I can imagine the insurance company being like, "No, you took it to the ranch. We don't."
Yeah,
cover that."
yeah.
You should have known better.
Yeah, but if they come back with that many drones, they're probably going to impose the
I know,
requirement that
they're
Thomas
gonna
and
be
I
like-
not have a conversation about the drone
Right.
species.
Next time, ask it to like write out a binary code or something. That's
Yes,
the
rather than
frustration. Ask it something else.
You know,
No. I mean, quite honestly, I think the gift would be if I'm like, if bad things are going to happen when we dig, then let's see this massive $1 million machine burst into flames while I'm digging. Like that would be something.
I mean,
there you go, guys. There you go. That's the flavor of our
So
conversation.
ranch,
Oh.
I'm not impressed by drill rods breaking off in the hill. If you want to impress me, then by no fault of my own, we just need to see that machine burst into flames while we're digging. There you go.
I knew.
as long as you get out of it first.
There's my irreverence, and I'll probably regret that.
I
Hopefully
know.
not
Please
there.
let us know how you're doing tomorrow after
Yeah.
you go back out to work.
Hopefully, we're not here in a year, telling you, "Oh my gosh, can you guys believe?"
I wish I wouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
So let me show you this. We were talking about the video there, and I did have a little bit of it.
Yes, you
This
did.
is where, and I don't know, is that Preston there?
Yes.
And he was telling everybody to get back.
Mhm.
Uh,
they use some really
I'm
color.
glad they bleeped it because
Did they bleep
Yeah.
it?
Well, they either cut it or they found clips of him and Tyler.
Did they do get in the bleep cars?
No.
Okay.
But here's how it kind of went down. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. What a perspective.
So did they ever just determine what caused them to drop? Because that looks like instant power loss. I mean, that's free fall.
Yeah, it looks.
Well, there was that. So you saw in the show how they thought they were over on the East Field.
Yeah, we were getting
It's
to that
important to
point, too.
understand that when they set these shows up, they have three different geofences that are
Yep,
put in.
yep.
Right.
If the drones hit the first geofence, they get the command to go back and land.
Yep.
If they go past the second one, they get the command to land right there immediately.
Mhm.
If they hit the third geofence, it cuts the power and they drop.
Wow.
So the drones thought they were far outside
Way.
of where they were supposed to be.
But
Wow.
here's the interesting thing. So that would explain why the ones just dropped out of the sky. Is if they thought they were outside their geofence,
Mhm.
that would have issued the command to drop, right? But interestingly enough, we had several that took off and headed towards the east.
Mhm.
They went so far beyond the geofence and they just kept flying out there, and then they eventually landed out in the field.
Mhm.
And then when the entire swarm landed back where, and they're supposed to land right back at the exact spot they took off. When the entire drone swarm finally landed, they were all shifted towards the south
Mhm.
by, I can't remember, it was like 15 or 20 feet.
Yeah, that is a serious positional error.
Wow.
I have to say.
I'll let you get it from here.
Tom, thanks
See
for
you
coming.
guys.
I know
Yeah,
you
thank
did.
you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Oh,
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Well, and that kind of brings up, I had this
Yeah.
question as you were getting Thomas that came up. Michael
Yes.
Peyton asked this question. This may be a product of the show, but someone has always seems to announce out loud that it's time to do something. Have you tried scheduling something without speaking about it out loud?
Well, after all we just rehearsed, that question is starting to sound a lot more reasonable. I would have said to you, oh gosh.
You make your
I
plans
try
off
not-
ramp.
I try not to bring biases into this work, but I keep discovering that there are still a few lingering biases in my thinking, and I'm glad that I'm having this experience of examining my own thoughts about this, because quite frankly, yes, we've had the conversation many times about not announcing our intentions, but there's a part of me that smiles at that idea, thinking, gosh, this is so non sequitur, or it seems to be so superstitious. But now, as you said very eloquently, Mike, in the aggregate, it looks like there might be intentionality here. So we have to deal with this in a way that deals with both models. The one in which we're just dealing with, some kind of unusual physics, right? Something local in the environment, and the other one where there is intentionality. And so that leads right into, well, don't announce your intentions and see what happens. We've even talked about going off site and doing some planning. I don't want to spoil it by getting into the details, because then that would be kind of defeating the purpose. There are experiments. I kind of like the approach of having removing all premeditation, where you actually use something like a quantum random number generator, true random number generator, to actually determine what the next step is going to be. So I want you to know that yes, we've given thought to this, and actually gotten pretty far down that thought pathway. It's a great question.
Good. Yeah.
Now, and to my shame, I suppose, this is an idea that I probably would have treated lightly years ago. Here I am, red-handed in the act of learning.
Yeah. Well, we all are. We're all learning.
Yeah.
Exactly. Even watching the show, all of us are learning. Go ahead, Shannon.
I was going to say it would be really interesting if you guys did do something that was off ranch, planned it,
Yes.
did the experiment on the ranch, and then saw what happened, and then repeated it. Like if nothing happened unusual, and then repeated it by announcing that you were going to do it to see if there was interference with the second attempt at it.
Interesting. However,
and then repeat it one more time.
Yeah, that's right.
With a random trigger, so
Yes.
you don't even know when it's going to go off.
Yeah, that is exactly the point of what I was just rehearsing. Yes,
Perfect.
yes. Now, here's the thing. Let's make, depends on the size of your bubble on this one, where the bubble is everything that's taken into consideration, everything in the interior. Now, let me ask you this. Do you suppose that this conversation should be included in the bubble? Did we not just preemptively announce our intentions?
Yeah.
You definitely did. We're informing the ranch right now as to what your plans are. So.
Yeah, you see the problem with this.
Wow. Dang it. Well, there goes that idea.
No, well, I'm not saying it's off the table. I'm just saying, if we're going to think in this what might be an unnatural modality, we have to take all these off-axis things into consideration.
Oh, for sure.
Yep.
Well, at least our ideas didn't involve anything bursting into flames.
No, see, that's
now you're making.
I love that Thomas
No, I'm
is still
wishing
so
I hadn't said
defiant
that.
too.
Yeah,
You're
so
still so defiant.
Yeah.
we and look, I'd be lying if I told you that was the first time we had such a conversation, followed by an unusual outcome.
Yeah, probably so. I did see this from B. Jones, and I was going to try to put it up on screen. Well, B. Jones was asking, can we all focus? She was asking for a focus group. Can we all focus on there? Thank you, Christina. Can we all focus on the intention? ERIK is gifted with drone number 108. All right, so everybody focus on that, and let us know if that happens.
Oh goodness.
Yeah. So yeah.
All right.
And thank you, B. Jones. Appreciate it.
And by the way, that number is interesting. It has interesting significance. 108.
Isn't that one of the I think there was one place I saw that they called it an angel number or something like that. Isn't that one of those numbers? Like,
I recently had a conversation with Shannon about this, and I suppose I may have sprung a few interesting factoids on you, Shannon, when we talk about this. But again, I didn't select that drone. I didn't select that number. But it turns out that this 108 number came up on more than one occasion last summer in our work. And I was listening for that, and I noticed we go back to the FPV drone, the one that bit the rocks up on the last telemetry number that came back before it went to the ground was 108.
There are no coincidences.
Well, I also think it's interesting that B's lovely donation to your show too was 5666 because of it being that 666 in there and the 108.
Well, there is
not the numbers that we were talking about before, not making a biblical reference, but making just a literal numerical reference to the significance.
There's some really interesting sort of esoteric math, that connects. If you like to go down that pathway, it's fun. I like to look at it as sort of a recreational sort of footnote material.
Mhm.
But for those who might be interested in learning something along those lines, you could look up the significance of the number 108.
Sacred geometry. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like in a regular pentagon, the interior angles are 108 degrees, and it turns out that if you connect the vertices of a regular pentagon, of course, you get a 5-pointed star, and you can recover the golden ratio. If you look at the diagonals and I won't drag you through all that, but I think some
we like
folks,
it though.
yes. So you'll actually find that there is a relationship between the number 108 and some other very interesting mathematical constructs with history attached to them.
Wow.
It's interesting. It's important. I think
It
that
is.
in and of itself is also part of the totality of
Yes.
a situation as well. When you
Yep.
start, if you're going to start looking at the stuff, then looking at the origins and of even something like numbers is important.
I think at this point in my engagement with the ranch, I'm probably the last person to declare something out of scope. Yes, we're mathing. Okay.
That's good. That's good though, right?
We're allowed to do that.
That's a good thing.
Yes, we are mathing for sure. Oh my goodness. And that's one of those conversations. I mean, we could get into some deep stuff here. And maybe one of these days we're just going to have a show where we don't talk about an episode. We just get deep with stuff like that. Cause I think that would be,
now you're playing with my emotions.
yeah, see, I would love that. I think that would be fun. And Shannon and I have talked about that. Just get over there and just start talking about all kinds of interesting.
Right. So, by the way, you heard me sort of mumble, grumble, say, "Oh God," to myself as when that all played out. That was not a response to, "Oh no, this is a disaster." That was, "Oh, now I'm going to have these conversations." I could see it coming. When that happened, I could see, at some point in the future, I'm going to have to try to package this in a way that makes coherent sense. And so that was really what was going through my mind when I saw that happen, just as Thomas and I had discussed, less than 24 hours earlier.
Yeah, that is crazy. I have repeating requested. Yeah. What do we got here? Miriam?
Yeah. So to speak to that quickly, it's not exactly in my mandate. I don't. This is kind of a fun fact. I have only once in the entire history of my involvement with the ranch invited a guest on my initiative. Usually it's someone else who makes that call. And the one guest that I invited was with, considerable, I put it across to Brandon, and I explained what the context was. And so I did have someone come out and do an interview with me once. But I generally don't, it's not my call. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on, because I want to get to the analysis part of all of this stuff, and I did want to show just a little bit more of the video here. There's a portion in here, and honestly, Dragon, he had us laughing when we were watching it, but not. I mean, he was in a situation where he was, thinking about his own safety,
of course,
and yet the things that he said made us laugh, even because we know that he didn't get hurt apparently, because he's still around. But he was in this scene right here, coming up right here. He's like walking away, and he said, I think I wrote down what he said here. He said, "I don't want to be under this. I don't want to be under this." Hearing all the stuff that was going on. And then later he said, "Dude, I don't know if this is going to be a good idea," when they wanted to go and put the igniter back in the rocket because the rocket didn't launch. The igniter went bad, and then so he's, "I don't think this is a good idea." So I mean,
that's Bryant being Bryant,
Yeah, absolutely. You could hear it in his voice. He's like, "Dude, this is not smart," So I could feel for him. I'm like, I don't know if I want to be out there.
Yes.
So as we go along here, there is a portion now of the where they shot the rocket. Okay, now we saw the rocket go up, and
yes,
and I caught that disappearing act that it did.
Yes, yes.
Right there. And I wanted to show this little piece. Now, this is where you guys got into the analysis of everything. Caleb is showing where it disappeared there. And then it gets launched again, or you show it again, I should say. And then what I picked out, I was watching this, and at one portion of it, right there,
Yes,
it's there's two. It looks like it's
A reflection.
Is it a reflection or?
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, there was a couple of thoughts that I came up with: a reflection.
I like where you're going with this.
Or also, it was being manipulated. It was being forcefully moved in some way, and I saw that right there, and I thought, "Oh my gosh, I got to make a point and get your thoughts on this," knowing that you were going to be here. Now, what I did just to show, and I wanted to bring this back up here. There is a couple of pictures that I have that I put side by side, and I think there are these right here. Okay. Let me see if I can zoom these in. Yeah. Okay. Now, what these are is that little scene you just saw. This is where it looked very bright. And then the next one, it just, well, I got to go back and forth here. You can see it shift. Now look at that shift. I mean, that's I don't know how well you can see that. It shifts from here clear over to here in the second picture. And here it is where it's like disappearing. It moved over, and it looks to me like that's several feet. What you're doing? I know you saw this because I know you you go through these with a fine-tooth comb.
Yes.
What was your thought when you saw that shift to the side like that?
Two things came to mind, and you brought them right back to mind for me. And keep in mind, not all of our commentary makes it into the final cut, of course. So I'm probably retracing some steps here, but I would assume by now that everyone has heard Caleb describe something that he saw on a blue sky day, looking towards the south from the mesa, not far from that circle of stones. And, he used the word shift to describe the effect that he saw as he was watching birds fly through the air, and they seemed to instantaneously shift in position and then return, as it were, defining the boundaries of some effect, which he later then describes as a transparent bar of soap. I think that's the geometry that he's trying to suggest.
Yep.
So, as you could see, this got Caleb out of his chair.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't asked him this question, but I kind of wonder whether that shifting that we just saw there didn't bring back that memory, that exact memory for him, an optical effect. Right in line with that, I guess, subheading B on that one thought was that, we have seen photogrammetric anomalies, famously the spire, which, I take every opportunity I can to make clear to folks that that's not an image of a thing that is there in that shape, but is an effect on the data itself, possibly the optical information, the light. And so if there were something with what I call a non-unitary index of refraction, in other words, something that was glassy or like water, or optically different from air, you might expect an effect like that, right? That could account for some of the weird things that we've seen in the photogrammetry surveys, as well as these, what you just described as this kind of double image or this shifting. So that was one thought. And the other one escapes me. It'll come back to me.
Well, it was certainly interesting because, like I said, it looked like it does disappear. I mean, obviously it disappears for, I don't know how many feet that is.
Okay. The other one came back to me. It came back to me. Okay. So the other one is, this is typical of me. What's the mundane explanation? And I thought, oh goodness, is it possible that the light, if there was more than one light on the rocket, and I don't know that that was the case, but if that one of them could have come off, right, and flown independently from the rocket,
Right.
Is that a possibility? I was just trying to account for the presence of, why do we have this shift? Why do we see it here and then here? Are we seeing the same thing? It was the question that comes to mind. This is just going, through the inventory of possible explanations.
Yeah. So that really blew my mind when I saw that. I thought, man, that thing just moved over to the left as it went up. And you guys did, because I think Caleb was saying something about it being like about the height where the spire was. And
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And then
Perfect.
there is the rock with those symbols.
Yes.
This rock here with these symbols, they always highlight this one, but they never highlight the double image of it over here
why
on the
not?
side. I don't know why they never do. It's like there's another one right there. It's just the opposite of it. Showing like a gate or a portal or a
Interesting. I obviously not. I didn't realize that it was being selectively highlighted like that in the material. But let me share something about that glyph, that petroglyph there. When I first saw that, honestly, the very first thing that came to mind was not an interpretation relative to some constellation or anything like that. But what I saw, or what I thought I was seeing, is effectively a billboard, something that marked the spot that said, up there on top of the mesa, you have this arrangement of stones. It's a special place. In other words, I thought it was a glyph making reference to the circle of stones up on top. And I asked that question several times of those who are more knowledgeable about, is that part of the tool set? Is that habitual? Do we see petroglyphs that reference other sites? And I never really did get much traction on this idea. But if you look at this, and this picture makes it a little harder, you do see what appears to be part, like an arc of glyphs, or forming kind of a part of a circle. And obviously this thing's broken. So just the interpretation of this is still very open in my mind. I'm reminded, as I look at that sort of pie looking, or it looks like kind of like the Russian letter L, sort of like, L. I look at that and I'm reminded of the what showed up in the Lunason data. Just to the west of the triangle, you've got a line, and then it kind of juts over and kind of forms like a pie, and then
yes,
it's hard not to see those things.
I believe we talked about that in a previous podcast, because that's what reminded me of this.
Okay, very good.
Yeah,
very good.
you did. That's right. I do remember that now. Wow. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So, so you're making a connection, I gather, between what we saw with the rocket, just prior to this frame, and the glyph.
Yes. Well, they were on the show.
Okay.
Because I think Caleb mentioned that, and Bryant was talking about it as well, talking about the fact that isn't that right about where the spire was, and also the and then I think Bryant's the one that mentioned this particular stone with those glyphs on it.
Cool.
So yeah, it was part of the episode. Go ahead, Shannon.
I was going to say, I saw that today. Carl posted that he's discovered that there's a discovery of new petroglyphs at the ranch. Like, he posted photographs of them. Is this something that you're familiar with? I mean, this isn't in this episode, but.
Well, I won't address it this time.
Okay. The only reason I bring it up is because he posted it on social media. Like, he wrote a whole thing about it being out there. Okay. Never mind then. We'll just move along. Pretend I didn't say anything. If it weren't live, we could cut it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, and then the next section here, this was when you looked at it from a different angle, or different camera.
Yes.
And then you saw that, we clearly saw it disappear there.
Okay. So I want to throw something out there.
Okay.
If you have a single light on the side of a cylindrical rocket body, and if that rocket body is rotating, you could get that effect.
Okay.
Just keep that in mind. I don't know what the configuration of lights was. And so again, look, it's inevitable. Some of these things are going to terminate in question marks for me, whereas they may terminate in exclamation points for others. I look at this as, well, okay, if there was a single light and if the rocket were twisting, I could see it going dark and then coming back in sight.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. I think for completeness, we have to include that possibility.
Absolutely. And that's something that I applaud you guys for, because so many times, we get the naysayers out there going, no, that's not possible, or, oh, it's this, or, oh, it's that, or they didn't even check this. And
Right.
And the answer from me would normally be, they probably did. It just didn't make the air, because I think you guys are very good at being, diligent about checking all these things. So there you go, by bringing that up.
And, in defense of those who take that approach, they don't have the benefit of the full conversation that has taken place.
Exactly.
And so I know this is, I'm kind of bucking the trend, but I actually welcome that kind of thinking. That is good mental engagement with what's going on. As far as they know, as far as what they're able to see, those kinds of points are not being raised, because they're only seeing what they see. So in fairness to the totality of our audience, including those who look at it with a desire to sort of put it to bed, I hate the term debunk, whatever. Yeah. I respect that folks are going through that checklist of possible explanations, some of them mundane, of course. Now, look, they only have so much time. I don't know what the total run time is for each episode. I think I've been told something like 42, 45 minutes.
Yeah, about 42 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. And so with that being the case, obviously those kinds of deliberations are part of what ends up on the floor. There are pieces of my life on the cutting room floor, or there would be if there were actual film involved.
Yeah.
And so I don't take exception to folks giving that kind of treatment to what they are able to see in the series. I actually think it's essential. As long as no one presumes to as long as no one impugns, my motives, or, goes after character, making the assumption, which is non sequitur,
right,
that I'm intentionally leaving that out. In fact, goodness, I'm sure that these episodes would, if they were as long as I would have them, probably no one would watch them to their end.
Oh, we would.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah,
we still would.
Yeah.
How many of you out there in the chat would still watch?
Because I do all of this agonizing analysis, of all the possible explanations. There is no confirmation bias in this person.
Well, yeah, but look at us in the insider program, watching the cameras all the time,
Yes.
and we've become a family. We really have. I've gotten to know, or feel like I know, so many of the folks in there, just from chatting with them every day and talking to them about different things. I wish I could spend more time in there than I do, but
sure.
It's a wonderful program, folks. Go to skinwalker-ranch.com. Check it out if you want to check out being an insider. It's a wonderful program. And we get to talk to these guys like all the time, which is really nice.
So, Eric, to your theory about the potentially of rotating, if the rocket were rotating and a light were on the side, you showed, though, two different perspectives of the same rocket launch.
Yes.
And it still disappeared.
Well, yeah, as it would, even no matter what perspective you're looking from, there's a point in time,
Sure.
it would,
was it the same height?
Right.
That
was
would
it
be my
exactly the same timestamp, that sort of thing?
Right.
Now, look, if it was, to within tens of milliseconds, the same timestamp, and they have it slated, I'm sure.
Sure.
And for those who don't know, the slate is the thing that, that thing that they click and it has a digital time on it. If it were in fact to the frame the same time when it went dark, then you'd conclude that it was either occluded by something, or that something de-energized the light producing thing, making it unable to produce the light. Or potentially, how about this one? There's a GR effect, general relativistic effect, that is shifting the light one way or the other, making it no longer visible. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on the table. What the data is, there's a light, there's not a light, and then there's a light, right? And it's translating through space. So there are lots of possible explanations for that, and that's the kind of deliberative process that I would probably include in a much longer episode if that were the format.
And if it was just the rocket and two different views, you could still potentially come up with an explanation.
Yes.
But then it happens to the FPV drone too.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Totality of circumstances.
Right here.
There we go. That really got our attention.
Now, is that the same height in which the pieces were missing from the lasers that were shot up? However many, Mike, when you did your excellent diagram and you showed us exactly what it would have to be shape wise. Is it the
I
same
don't.
height that it was happening?
Yeah, I don't know if we know how high that gap was in the space lasers, space cannons.
About 100
When they
feet
did
is what I
the,
thought
Was it?
the one was. That was
Yeah.
what it was said
It
initially.
was, I want to say 110.
Mhm.
so it was
Keep in mind,
higher.
yeah. So I mean, there seems to be this region, surprisingly low altitude, very accessible to us.
Mhm.
Anywhere from 30 or so feet above AGL at the triangle to, and then you've got the 110 feet or so figure that I just cited, and then we have something going on at about 5,000 feet AGL. I like it. Or 108.
108.
That was sharp. That was fast.
Good
Yeah,
recall. Yeah.
right. Yes. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, wouldn't
That's
that be
quite the
something?
jump to go from like 30 to 108 to 5,000
Well-
and not have anything in between.
Well, yeah, but I'm picturing this horribly dynamic thing that is just all over the place. It's moving, changing, morphing, whatever. So I don't assume invariance until something shows me that what I'm dealing with is a constant. So I could easily see something. This is going to sound funny, but what I've described to Travis and the guys, talking about what we might be dealing with, isn't even really that form that I created. That graphic that I created that ended up looking like the blob, right? I said, in my mind's eye, I see something almost tentacular, where there's maybe a central effect, an effect center, and then these things that shoot off and come down to ground level. We can imagine any sci-fi effect we want, and so that's something that keeps coming back to mind, is something very dynamic, even tentacular, like an octopus.
Yes. Now, again, we have like Mike was just talking. We have the rocket that seems to have disappeared for a moment or been blocked. The light's been blocked or something. Now we have that What'd you call it? The FP? I keep getting this wrong.
FPV, first person view.
Yes.
First person view. Okay.
Yeah.
That did, and then we get these little lights that show up right here in the mesa, or over by the mesa.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so the two very interesting, well, all of it was very interesting, but a couple of the points was to me, and then they showed this, the out point. So you have 2 points over on the mesa that you are calling the Eastfield Canyon area, where you have the in point, and then you have the area where the helo is coming over there that you are now calling the out point. And you've had so many different experiments that have shown the radio experiment, the radio that shouldn't have made the signal that far away, that was picked up from the in point to the out point. You've had this UAP that seems to have gone into the mesa at the end point and out. And now you have those drones that we talked, well, I haven't actually shown that picture yet, but it showed when the guys were there with you and you had them on screen and you were in the command center, and they showed that some of those drones lifted off. They got it to about 30 feet, and then they suddenly shifted over to the end point on their tracking, and they thought they were over there. Why? And like Travis said, of all the places on a 512 acre ranch, why there?
Yeah.
Why did they go there?
Yeah. Why not Homestead 2? Why not the South Tower? Why not the command center? Why exactly there?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a dang good question.
And so many different things are now looking at that same thing. It's like,
do you all ever, this is in the same vein, but it's different. Just thinking about how there's all these GPS anomalies and devices getting confused as to where they are. Do you guys ever experience disorientation to your own location when you're there? Are there periods of time where you get turned around being, yeah? Is it something that happens?
Yeah. Look, there are a lot of possible reasons for this sort of thing. A human being is a complex machine, right?
Right.
And there are a lot of possible environmental influences here. But the sense of disorientation or vertigo, even problems with what we call proprioception, which is, knowing where your limbs are, how am I, what's my posture?
Yeah.
That stuff, it isn't common. It doesn't happen often, but there are times when individuals, myself included, have experienced that, notably at the Homestead 2 specifically. Also in this, you might see it behind me, the unusual shape of the property. There's this place not far from where I'm sitting, where people have had that same experience. Yeah.
Interesting. So it messes in. That's something that, a lot of people have asked that question, especially when you see things like, and this was a question that one of the Tim had brought up earlier, talking about the cow. You see things happen to the animals that are on the ranch. And so that makes you wonder, about you all and your safety out there. If it's possible for whatever is out there to be affecting the animals that are there, we're all animals, and you guys are there too. So that really brings that into question as to what's the safety of that. And I know that Tim brought this out. Are the cows that die on the ranch or injured is another way of warning you guys to stop what you're doing?
I'm gonna volunteer a term that I've volunteered in our website and our chats. I coined a new term. What we just saw there was what we call a quadjecture.
A quadjecture.
A quadjecture. Okay. See if this makes any sense. It's a question that really is volunteering a conjecture. And I love those, so I couldn't quite figure out what term to use. So I made one up.
That's perfect.
So
I hope that somebody is keeping track of your ERIKisms, because that's what we
I'm always mangling. We'll blame the effect, the effect on the ranch, the disorienting effect on all sorts of things that go on up here for the creation of this and many other words. And so in response to this quadjecture, could it be? Well, it sounds like, there's a reason for the question, right? And, and again, this goes to intentionality. This goes to, hey, might this be signaling something? Yes, it could be. But, have I said anything by giving that answer? Anyone could give that answer, right?
Right.
I just want you to know that, yes, I do have respect for that line of thinking. It's just, well, what do we do to fill in the gap? How do we get from the quadjecture to some support for that, right?
Right.
And hopefully we survive the process of getting the answer.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't like to say a lot about my sort of personal physiological or perceptual experiences, because quite frankly, I'm anti-motivated to do that, because I don't want to disqualify myself from doing the work.
Understandable. I could have been referencing anyone being disoriented to their location. I suppose it would make the most sense, though, or at least it would be more interesting if it were to occur to people who spend the most time there, because they'd be less likely maybe to get turned around or confused.
Yeah, there are times. Okay, so you'll relate to this, I hope. You go into a space and you're not deliberately keeping up with the direction, you're the north, south, east, west, you're not focusing on the cardinal points. And you realize that you're facing a completely different direction from the one you thought you were. A really good example of that was involved some work that we did that wasn't aired, some tethered balloons, helium, like weather balloons, tethered in 3 points, and had an instrumentation package on it out in the Eastfield Canyon area where the all this interesting stuff is happening. And I went out there to retrieve the instruments. I actually brought the balloon down at like 5 or 6 in the morning. It was really early, because I was afraid it was going to smash on the ground. I saw the balloon kind of bobbing around like it was losing lift. And so I wanted to go retrieve my instruments before they were destroyed. I had a $1,000 ion counter on it, things like that. And so I brought it down, and no sooner did I get this stuff down this fog bank rolled in. And I realized I had no idea what direction I was facing once I lost those visual cues. I was completely, there was no north, south, east, or west. There was only up and down. And so it took me forever to get out of there. Now, everyone's had that experience or something like it, I'm sure. But I realized that, I'm just one perceptual lapse away from being completely lost sometimes.
Wow. All right. So the last thing I wanted to talk to you about that I had on my docket, I know Mike and Shannon might, was that they had shown between 8 and 8:30, they had shown a Behind the Gates episode.
Okay.
And in this Behind the Gates episode, they had spoken, everybody, you were there with Maddie Blake. You guys were all sitting there by Homestead too. And he was asking you particular questions. And one of the questions came up was the blob. That was seen.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm gonna flash up a picture here. Of course, everybody remembers the blob. And we were doing a little watch party in Discord, and everybody said, "Jeff, did you see the other picture they have of the blob?" And I was like, "What? No, I missed that." And I had to go back and watch it today. So there was this one that we've all seen as the rocket was approaching. It was lighting up, and then it burst up, and then there was this one.
I'm so glad this has been put out there. I've been waiting so long.
It has now been aired last night, and I put the two side by side just to kind of get a look at it. Now I know that you, what's with this other picture that we knew nothing about?
Okay, all right. What you're looking at on the left is a view through the high-speed camera system. It's seeing things, I think, both in the visual and the near infrared. The camera is positioned to the south of the launch tower, looking north, if I have my bearings right.
Toward the mesa?
Towards the mesa, exactly. So we have a rocket launch in progress, and we see this thing that I've described as having some features like if you were to it's like a tomographic view, meaning a slice through a bowl with a ball in it. Okay, so imagine a sphere inside of a bowl. Okay. Now, I would say that's not well supported by a single view. Well, what you see on the right, you're going to like this.
Okay.
That's my work. And specifically what that is a piece of image processing, post-processing that I did on footage that was shot from the Eagle's Nest. So these are the surveillance cameras, not Burdett Anderson's high-speed camera, but this is the same event, looking from substantially to the east and slightly to the north, looking back towards it in the direction of the triangle. And the fact is, I'll confess, when I originally, I trained the cameras on the launch site, not really expecting to get anything other than some phenomenal rocket launch footage. And it never occurred to me at the time when we first got this recording, this event of this blob. It never even dawned on me that I might have captured it from another perspective.
Wow.
I just didn't think the cameras had it in them. Well, I just got this idea during the winter, during the non-filming season after that. And I thought, instead of assuming that it's not there, let me see what I can do with that grayscale and see if I can tease out any kind of structure in the slight variations of, the continuum of gray and going into the whites. And so I created a filter that allowed me to see with color, as you can see there, to see these forms that are otherwise just invisible to us in the raw footage. And so this is some post-processing work. I didn't inject the data. I'm simply resolving data that was in that surveillance camera footage from essentially a perpendicular view. So now we have a view from the south looking north towards the mesa. We have a view from the east looking back down at this event. And now this idea of two tomographic or sliced views portraying what could be a ball in a bowl, starts to make more sense. And again, when I saw this, I couldn't. I think I probably said something out loud when I first saw this with this filter. I said, "You got to be kidding me! You got to be kidding me!" I didn't expect to have a second witness on that event.
Wow.
But that's in fact what that is.
And and that's the thing. And I was trying to figure out, and maybe I will at some point try to figure out how to overlay the two on top of each other. But I tell you honestly, you still have a lot of that same image in this one. You got that same bowl sort of looking with the ball in it. Do the colors represent? You may have just mentioned this, and I was actually reading a little bit of the chat, and I apologize. But is it the colors represent anything in particular? Did you already answer that?
Yeah. So yeah, it's no problem. I don't mind repeating.
Sorry.
I mean, this is a little dry. I'll admit. Pretty extended version of it. Yeah. So what you're looking at here I created a filter that uses colors to help us discern differences in the grayscale values. Okay. Otherwise, very close to each other.
Yeah.
And additionally, what I did is so if you imagine the input being the grayscale level and the output being a value of red or green or blue, what I did is I deliberately put returns to 0 between the max points. That's why you have the black, in between the green and the red. I hope I'm not boring you with this, but
no.
I wanted to be able to make out as best I could to add contrast so that I could see anything that's hidden in that surveillance
Makes sense. Yeah.
footage. And so I tailored this I'll call it a filter, and I can actually in real time I can move the sliders around, and I can you can see how it evolves and the point at which the contrast is just right to see that shape from a camera asset that I would not have expected to be able to resolve this at all. It's remarkable to me that you get exactly that geometry. And again, the fact that it bears a resemblance to that model that I created after season 3 is just mind blowing.
Yeah.
The anomaly model. I created that at the request of some of the producers when they were asking for something visual. Yeah. And it early in the evolution of that model, after there's a like an ellipsoid of rotation, and there's an impactor, and it creates these waves, and there's a point where you get this, this thing, what you see there. It's just it's confusing.
It's amazing to me.
They're coming out in the data, and it's like, well, what's actually going on here?
Yeah.
I'm glad to have that second witness, and I'm also glad to learn that has been aired.
Yeah, to me it is, and you guys have proven, and I think I mentioned this maybe the last time that you were on with us, but it's proven that there's something happening out there, and I think you guys are getting closer and closer to being able to detect it whenever it does appear, because it seems like it does change. But so many things going back to that in and the out point, and now and I heard that you said at the end of last night's episode, you and Travis were talking, and you said we need to focus on this. And I think you're exactly right, because there are so many different things of that, like the 1.6 you're getting with the Kraken saying it's coming from Homestead 2. And then Travis drives out there, and all of a sudden it's coming up from straight above. He shoots a couple rockets. One gets hung in the air. I mean, there's just too many things going on out there.
I know. I was going to say that. It feels like, do you think that these are all different things working as part of the same mechanism, like different parts of the same machine? Or do you think it's just one big machine?
When you're talking to a physicist like me, you're talking to somebody who's looking for an explanation that has unifying appeal. We tend towards single cause, if we can get it. When I came into this work with the narrative as it was, it seemed like we had all these disparate things taking place, all these very different things. And, I immediately made a beeline for how do I unify all this? And so I suppose it reveals a bias on my part that I would answer you, Shannon, and say, oh, I think it's part of the same thing, some sort of common causality. But I'll admit that I can't rigorously prove it.
Yep.
That's what we're here to explore. You know, if we can all exercise the patience, especially those who have a tendency to really, operate under the influence of a craven desire for closure, if we can suspend that for a while and just allow us collectively to explore, without presupposing any one answer or any agenda on our parts, if we can just explore, we're going to keep getting results of this kind that I say will self-assemble into a coherent explanation. Hopefully one with a common causality or single causality.
Yeah, exactly. I have a friend of mine at work, and we were talking about this today, and he said, well, what have they found? I said, a lot of questions. They haven't come with any, you haven't been able to determine what's going on yet, but you're getting closer. I think you're getting so much closer. Really, with all of these experiments.
There's a mindset that looks at things like the Apollo space program in terms of how much money was spent, right? And then there's a mindset that says how many societally relevant technologies were developed in support of that effort that were the fuel of our economy.
Yes.
Our modern era is provisioned by work that was begun in service to that outlandish ambition, to launch to the moon. And so, I think there's this very practical sort of austere outlook that says, get me the answer. I want closure. And then there's the other, that if we allow ourselves to kind of go back to that joy that we had when we were all kids, of just exploring and having fun and using, good, to the extent possible, let's use the best practices, the tools and methods of in this case, physics, but also other disciplines. And I think, I'm still of the mind that I think we're going to get enough data that it will fill in those dots, if you will. We'll get a full picture. For those who don't have the patience for it, I probably can't help you.
Yeah, well, we do. All of us do, for sure. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that are good things take time. There you go. Absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
I'm just curious what people plan on doing with it. Like, it's one of those things. It's like you think that you can handle it until you have it, and then you're like, yeah, I don't. What do people plan on doing with all of the answers? I think it feels like closure means ending of some sort, I guess, unless people think it'll be a new beginning of something. You just take your time.
If I can push the discourse a little bit in the direction such that when we each say, so what, that it is no longer a rhetorical question, but we are actually asking sincerely, so what does this mean? Yeah. I would consider that a success, because these days, when people say, so what, it usually expresses disinterest, whatever. Whereas when I say, so what, I mean, okay, what does this mean? I like to say that, the ranch, and specifically certain locations of high strangeness on the ranch, are the places where I stopped asking what if and started asking what now. And so that's
exciting.
That is exciting. I mean, what else is there?
Well, I know we were talking about it earlier, Mike and I, and we were talking about how the fact that you guys see a UAP now, and you just get all excited about it. Now it's like, oh, look, there's one right there. Now it's become so commonplace.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the U part is kind of a blank check, right? The fact that something's unidentified, it's a fairly low barrier to entry into that classification, right? It's just like unidentified. Yep. I don't want to make the leap every time we see something that we can't account for in the sky and make the leap and say that we're dealing with a nuts and bolts craft of some kind.
Right.
I think the intent, and I guess Jay would be the one to answer this question, but I think the intent behind the introduction of that term was to make it easier to take in for the dialogue to ingest these other non-classified events that we simply haven't identified. And so I'm comfortable with the term UAP in that sense, in the sense that we haven't identified what it is, but not in the sense of making any otherworldly claims about them.
So we got Animal Lover brought up, our realities are becoming more exciting and stranger. It's happening in a way we've always been told is just a fairy tale, but we'll ultimately discover is the way of life actually is. So I like that. That's kind of interesting, because you've been told that, oh, that's just your imagination or whatever, and yet it's starting to be different than that, isn't it?
Well, as long as the scope of what you're studying includes the way your imagination works, you can't lose.
Exactly.
Look, it's not just about what's out there, what's in the mesa, what's under the triangle, what was that thing in the sky. It's not just about that. In fact, I would say the greater part of what maintains my interest in this whole context is I use the word heuristics, the study of epistemology. Like how do we form and vet we'll say prospective conclusions, right? That is as much a part of this exploration as anything else. And so it's almost a greater and more portable treasure to us to have this opportunity at the ranch to revisit our conclusion formation process. That's a big part of what keeps me in the game.
Great. It looks like Mike has a cat showing up in the background.
You
there.
stole my cat thunder, Mike.
Nope, you saw nothing.
In your background.
Pay no attention. There's not a tuxedo cat back there.
Right.
I'm going to tell Banks.
Yeah. So, Mike, you got the last one.
All right.
Eric, I just have one simple request. Could you please have the ranch cause some consistent fail modes so we can figure out what the heck is going on? It seems like it's different every single time, or it doesn't happen at all. The hardest thing to diagnose is an inconsistent fail mode.
Yeah.
Take a car with an intermittent problem to a mechanic, and
He doesn't hear it.
they'll hand it right back to you.
Yep.
They bring it when it's completely broken because that's a lot easier to fix.
Yeah.
If you could fix that part of the ranch, that would be great.
Yeah.
Spoken like a true engineer.
All right. Wow. Well, thank you very much, Eric. We certainly appreciate it. I know, like you see you guys at the ranch. I know you hardly get any sleep at all, but you take time out of your day to come and join us. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. It was really nice because we get more of the story this way.
Sure.
And we get parts of the story we didn't even know existed, like you and Thomas talking about raining drones.
Yes. I'm so glad he came in. I'm glad he came in when he did. I know he's
I am too.
But yeah, so
Fascinating.
Yeah. Well, an important part of what we're doing here is we're pulling back the curtain on mindset. We're pulling back the curtain on the why, not just the what. I want to remind everyone. Someone asked a really good question that I didn't respond to. Maybe we'll close with this. Okay. They asked a question about my personal interactions with Kevin Burns, who was the founder of Prometheus Entertainment. Of course, he's since passed away.
Yep.
He and I had some really cool private phone conversations. I had a conversation with him in his office as well back when we first met. And there's a couple of things he said that I think warrant repeating here and thinking about. One of those things is that what he considered to be the virtuous deliverable of his life's work. Like, for example, with the Ancient Aliens series and similar things, was the packaging of the question, what if, right? What if? And you heard me say earlier that, I transitioned from what if to what now here at the ranch, but the what if had to come first. And so I think that is a virtuous deliverable, to elevate the question, what if, for people who might not otherwise have had those questions. And the other thing that he said that was kind of memorable is he said, look, history tells, but mystery sells. I thought that was pretty interesting. I thought that was an interesting window on his mindset.
Yeah, that is.
That's very true. Yeah. And I think that having opportunities like this is really wonderful for the people that are invested and interested and curious too, because it's sort of pulling back the curtain to hear what the stuff that wouldn't make the cut because it wouldn't sell necessarily, because those are important parts of being invested in what's happening there as a general viewer or somebody that wants to contribute to the dialogue on it.
I'd say that those who are following this work closely might consider themselves as having invested in an intellectual gym membership. You don't go to the gym to watch somebody else lift the weights, right? Or do the exercise.
Right.
It gives you the opportunity to do it for yourself. and to enjoy, all the incremental victories, to work the puzzle, work the problem. And I think that's what we're sharing. I think that's a big part of what we're doing with the series and also with these kinds of interactions here.
Well, it's definitely unprecedented. What Brandon and has created here with Mr. Burns, and then you guys have all done here is unprecedented for sure. And I think I wish a lot more shows did something like this, because it brings all of us involved in it. The whole Insider program, and I'll tout that one more time.
Yeah.
Fantastic program, and we get so much more information from it, and we get to help with the experiment in a way that is unprecedented. We all get to help with that. My hat's off to him and to you all for what you've done with that. And I think it's a great program. Check it out, folks. Skinwalker-ranch.com. And hopefully I'm planning on being at Phenomicon again this year. I can't wait. Got everything all lined up where I'm going to be staying and everything. And I sure wish Shannon and Mike were going. I don't know that you are, or either one, but I sure wish you were. It's great. And Jim Kelgard said he's buying tacos for everybody. So yeah. So
well,
maybe now. Yeah, Mike and I are there.
Oh wow.
Free tacos.
Well, that's commitment.
Yeah. Well,
There
I don't know
you
if Jim's
go.
still out there or not, but he said that he usually does a meet and greet with the insiders the night before on Tuesday night, I think it is. And I plan my flight and everything to get there so I can go to that because it's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so Eric,
I have no idea what I'm going to present. I have no idea. I usually don't know until the night before.
That's a good plan.
yeah.
That's
Well,
one
I
thing
know
we
that you
have
and
to
Pete are going to do the outside event again. I saw
Good.
that.
We're doing that. All right, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to know it.
Yeah. So there's one thing. Yeah. So it's and I'm going to be going to that too, by the way. So
Okay.
it was
Excellent.
great last year. I
Excellent.
had a lot of good time with it. So, all right. Well, thank you
for
folks for
having me.
being here with us tonight. And again, to Mike and Shannon, thank you guys so much. Christina for helping with all the chat. And Linda out there, I know she was out in the chat helping too and everything. Thank you so much for all your help. Folks, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, give us a thumbs up if you like the content of our show, and tell your friends about this. Tell everybody about this, because this information that we covered here tonight, it's not just for me that I say share it, because this was fantastic stuff coming from Eric here tonight. And you're not going to want to miss this. You're not going to get it anywhere else unless you're part of the Insider program. So there you go. All right. With that, I'm going to say goodnight, and we'll catch you next time right here on the J Free 906 podcast.